A teen girl asks for water on a flight. What happens next exposes the entire airline. She only asked for water, but what she got instead was silence, denial, and humiliation. 17-year-old Zuri Ellis pressed her call button during a routine flight. Her asthma symptoms were creeping in. The flight attendant ignored her, then insulted her. And when Zuri refused to stay silent, the flight crew labeled her a threat and had her removed from the plane. What no one knew, Zuri's father owned the airline. What follows is a true story of quiet defiance, hidden power, and a public reckoning that would shake the skies. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe dignity should never be denied, hit the like button and subscribe. Let's get into it. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the Ellis residence in Potomac Hills, casting long golden streaks across the marble kitchen floor. Everything in the home spoke of wealth, not loud but precise. Clean lines, warm wood, and quiet elegance. At the counter, Zuri Ellis, 17 years old, dressed in a navy blue blazer and sneakers, sprinkled granola into her yogurt while scrolling through her tablet. Across from her, her father, Malcolm Ellis, sipped espresso and reviewed emails on his phone. He was calm as always, salt and pepper beard, trimmed, tight dark sweater immaculately pressed. Every inch of him said restraint and control. But Zuri caught the flicker in his eyes. He was preparing for something. "You still sure you want to do this separately?" she asked, not looking up. "That's the point," Malcolm replied. "You go economy, I go business class. 2 perspectives, 1 company, 1 test." Zuri raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. See how they treat a regular passenger." "A regular black passenger," Malcolm clarified. "Skylight has a reputation. Let's see if it holds when no one's watching." Zuri didn't flinch. She understood. Her father had built his fortune precisely because he knew how the world worked when no one thought they were being watched. And now, with 63% hidden ownership in Skylight Airlines, he had one goal: expose the cracks without announcing who held the hammer. She stirred her yogurt slowly. "You think it'll be different now that you own it? I think systems don't change until they're forced to. Let's force it." At Reagan National Airport, Zuri stood in the economy check-in line. The agent, a woman with a tight ponytail and tired eyes, looked at her passport, then back at her face. Twice. "You purchased this ticket yourself?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Zuri replied, patient, polite. The woman nodded, then typed slowly. "Can I see the credit card used to book?" Zuri handed over the card. The woman studied it like it was counterfeit. When a white teenage girl walked up minutes later, sweatpants, earbuds dangling, her check-in lasted less than 30 seconds. Smile stamp pass. Zuri texted her father, "Microaggression count 3, and I haven't even made it to the gate." He replied with a single word, "Logged." At the gate, the scene repeated. Her boarding group was called, but when Zuri stepped forward, the gate agent frowned. "This doesn't look right. Step aside." Zuri pointed at her boarding pass. "I'm Group 4. That's the group you just called. We just need to verify something," the agent said. Behind her, 3 white passengers were waved through without pause. 5 minutes later, she was allowed to board. Inside the aircraft, the air was cool and clean. Zuri slid into seat 17B, tucked her backpack beneath the seat, and glanced briefly out the window. She took out her water bottle and medication, double-checking the dosage. Her doctor had warned her altitude dehydration can trigger attacks. Stay ahead of it. Hydrate early. Always carry your own. But TSA had dumped her water during security. As she clicked her seatbelt, she spotted her father boarding through the business class ramp across the jetway. His suit sharp, his walk deliberate. He didn't look at her. Didn't need to. This was a test, and they both knew the rules. Observe. Don't interfere. Let the system speak for itself. As passengers filled the rows, Zuri exhaled, preparing for what was supposed to be a short flight to Boston. But something in her gut whispered, this wasn't going to be a normal flight. And she was right. 30 minutes after takeoff, the cabin had settled into quiet routine. Passengers scrolled through playlists, reclined their seats, or stared out at the clouds. Flight attendants moved up and down the aisle, their routines as precise as clockwork. Zuri Ellis was calm on the outside, but inside her throat felt dry. A subtle scratch that wasn't alarming yet, but she recognized it. It was the beginning of something she'd been trained to detect early. For someone with asthma, dehydration at 30,000 feet wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. She pressed the call button above her seat. It glowed amber. She waited. A flight attendant passed, then another. Neither stopped. The light stayed on. Zuri waited 10 minutes, glancing toward the galley every few seconds. When Cheryl Dawson, a tall, trim woman in her late 40s with perfectly set blonde hair, walked by, Zuri lifted a hand slightly. "Excuse me," Zuri said gently. "Could I have some water, please?" Cheryl didn't stop walking. "Drink service hasn't started yet. You'll need to wait." Zuri sat up straighter. "I understand, but I have asthma. My doctor—" "We'll get to you when it's your rouse turn," Cheryl interrupted, disappearing into the galley. Zuri blinked. No acknowledgement, no eye contact, no empathy. She looked down, adjusted the sleeve of her hoodie, and breathed slowly. "Stay calm. Don't escalate. Observe." But it wasn't just about comfort anymore. Her chest felt tighter now. 10 minutes passed. The drink cart finally emerged from the front of the cabin. Cheryl smiled at a young white couple in row 11. "Would you like sparkling or still?" Zuri watched as Cheryl took custom requests, offered extra snacks, laughed with passengers. By the time the cart reached row 17, Cheryl addressed the man in the aisle seat, David Monroe, a clean-cut black businessman in his late 30s, offering water and juice. Then she began to push the cart forward. Zuri leaned forward, her voice firmer this time. "Excuse me, I requested water earlier. I have asthma and I really need to hydrate." Cheryl's expression tightened. "We're moving as quickly as possible. You'll have to be patient like everyone else." David turned to Cheryl. "Actually, she asked long before I did. I heard her." Cheryl's smile reappeared, but only for him. "Sir, we serve in a specific order. I'm sure you understand." Before David could respond, Cheryl turned back to the cart and continued forward. Zuri felt her chest begin to compress. Not badly yet, not crisis mode, but close. She retrieved her inhaler and held it in her hand. David frowned, looked at Zuri. That was wrong. Zuri gave a small, tight smile. "I'm used to it." "No, you shouldn't have to be." He reached for his water cup, untouched, and offered it to her. She hesitated. "Thank you. Are you sure?" He nodded. "Absolutely." Zuri took the cup with shaky fingers. Just as she lifted it, Cheryl spun around. "Sir, that water is for paying customers only." David looked confused. "She is a paying customer." Without warning, Cheryl stepped forward, snatched the cup from Zuri's hand. Water splashed onto Zuri's hoodie. Cheryl leaned closer, voice low but sharp. "Your kind needs to learn patience." The moment snapped into silence. David's eyebrows lifted. "What did you just say to her?" Cheryl straightened. Her tone returned to professional neutrality. "Sir, I'm asking you not to get involved. Some passengers try to create incidents where none exist." Zuri didn't yell. She didn't cry. She reached into her hoodie pocket, unlocked her phone, and opened the camera app. Click. Recording started. The cart moved forward. Cheryl didn't look back. Zuri pressed the inhaler once. Relief was limited. Her breathing remained shallow, her pulse high. She positioned her phone discreetly on her tray camera, angled toward the aisle. David leaned in. "You okay?" Zuri nodded faintly. "Just need to document this. That's what my dad taught me." More passengers were noticing now. Some eyes peeked over seats. A whisper rippled. Zuri pressed the call button again. Nothing. When Cheryl returned 10 minutes later, Zuri spoke, clearly and on camera. "I need water. I've asked multiple times. I have asthma and I'm experiencing symptoms." Cheryl froze mid-step. "Are you recording me?" she asked sharply. "Yes," Zuri said. "I'm documenting that I've requested medical assistance and been denied. You can't record on this flight. It's against airline policy." David opened his tablet. "Actually, it's not. Passengers may record in public areas if there's a safety concern. That's in Skylight's own terms of service." Cheryl's smile vanished completely. "Put that phone away immediately, or I will have you removed for non-compliance." Zuri looked directly at her. "This is non-compliance, or is it that you didn't expect anyone to hold you accountable?" Cheryl's eyes flared. "This is disruptive behavior," she announced loudly. "I won't tolerate it on my flight." Heads turned, eyes stared, silence deepened. David folded his arms. "The only disruption here is you denying basic care to a teenager." "Stay out of it, sir," Cheryl snapped. Too late. Passengers from surrounding rows were filming now. Someone muttered, "This is unbelievable." The intercom clicked on. The captain's voice cut through the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a situation in the cabin, we will be making an unscheduled landing in Philadelphia. Please remain seated." Zuri's hands shook. Her request for water had just escalated into a security incident. She looked around the cabin. People watched her, not with fear, but with uncertainty. Some held phones, some turned away. One woman across the aisle gave her a small nod. She wasn't alone anymore, but she was still the one being targeted, and the system was still protecting Cheryl. The plane began its descent slower than usual, circling as the crew prepared for the emergency landing. A strange stillness settled over the cabin. Eyes kept flicking toward Zuri Ellis, still seated in 17B. Her phone quietly recording her breathing, labored but steady. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply waited. Next to her, David Monroe remained still, brows furrowed, fists clenched just out of sight. He knew what was happening. So did half the plane, but only a few dared to look directly at it. Flight attendant Cheryl Dawson paced just behind the beverage cart, flustered. Her earlier confidence was cracking. She whispered to another crew member who hesitated, uncertain how to proceed. Zuri leaned her head back slightly, eyes half closed. She clutched her inhaler like a lifeline, her other hand gripping her phone. Her breath was thin, audible, now. A soft wheeze that echoed louder than any engine hum. Across the curtain, up in business class, Malcolm Ellis sat upright, eyes narrowed. His phone had buzzed once. A notification. Then nothing. He tried texting again. "Everything okay?" Still undelivered. The attendant came by with champagne. He waved it off. "Excuse me," he said calmly. "I'd like to check on someone in economy. My daughter." The attendant's smile stiffened. "I'm afraid we've had a minor issue. The captain has asked all passengers to remain seated." "I understand," Malcolm said. "But I'm not asking for peanuts or pillows. I'm asking if my child is okay." She hesitated. "I can deliver a message." "No need," he said, voice low. "I'll wait. But I suggest someone lets the captain know who's watching." He sat back slowly, hands folded. Face composed but thunder just behind the eyes. Back in row 17, Zuri felt the plane leveling. The city came into view through the window, Philadelphia, a destination she never asked for. Overhead, the intercom clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. Security will be boarding the aircraft momentarily to address a passenger situation. Do not interfere." The cabin went still. No more whispers. Zuri took one last puff of her inhaler and exhaled slowly. Her camera was still rolling. Moments later, the doors opened. Sunlight spilled into the cabin along with 2 airport security officers. Uniformed, stern, mechanical in their movements. Cheryl stepped forward with rehearsed urgency. "That's her," she announced, gesturing to Zuri. "She's refused instructions, caused disruption, and violated flight policy." The lead officer looked at Zuri. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." "I'm having an asthma attack," Zuri said softly. "And I've asked for medical help, not punishment." "She's lying," Cheryl interjected. "She's been argumentative the whole flight." David stood. "That's not true," he said. "I've been here the whole time. She asked for water. You refused. She's been calm, respectful, and—" "Sir, we'll need you to sit down," the officer snapped. Zuri slowly rose, shoulders back, chest tight. She didn't plead. She didn't resist. She just walked down the aisle. And as she did, dozens of passengers lifted their phones, not in fear but in solidarity, recording, documenting, witnessing. The moment was no longer private. It was public. Cheryl watched her go, arms crossed, expression unreadable. But in her gut, she felt it. Control was slipping. At the front of the plane, Malcolm stood before they could stop him. "That's my daughter," he said, voice steady, sharp as steel. "Sir, remain seated," the attendant warned. "I'm not asking. I'm telling." Then he stepped into the aisle, locked eyes with the officers escorting Zuri off the plane. He didn't yell. He didn't posture. He just walked behind them. Because now the silence had done its job, and power was shifting. The terminal at Philadelphia International Airport buzzed with confused passengers and restless airline staff. Gate agents whispered behind counters. Uniformed security officers walked with rigid posture. But in the center of it all, chaos was unfolding. Quiet, clinical, and captured on a dozen smartphones. Zuri Ellis stood between 2 security officers, her shoulders tense, chest rising and falling with shallow, controlled breaths. Her skin looked pale beneath the fluorescent lighting, her voice a whisper. "I just asked for water." Her knees wobbled. One of the officers reached to steady her, but she shook her head. "I'm fine." She wasn't. Her oxygen was low. Her chest felt like it had shrunk 2 sizes. But she wasn't going to collapse. Not here, not now, not until her father got to her. Then her legs gave out. She hit the ground, hard, knees first, then hands. Her phone clattered across the tile, still recording. Her mouth opened but made no sound. A wheeze, then nothing. From the crowd, a voice cut through the noise. "Get out of the way." A woman in a dark green blouse, Dr. Aisha Patel, the physician from row 19, rushed forward, ducking under the arms of the stunned officers. She knelt beside Zuri and checked her pulse. "She's in respiratory distress," Dr. Patel barked. "Where's her inhaler? Where's her water?" "She's exaggerating," said Cheryl Dawson, who had followed them off the plane, arms crossed, eyes cold. "This has all been a scene." Dr. Patel didn't even look up. "She's going into respiratory failure, and you think this is a performance?" The lead officer turned suddenly uncertain. "Do we need paramedics?" "We needed them 10 minutes ago, Doctor," Patel snapped. A nearby airport staff member radioed for emergency medical. A crowd had formed, phones up, faces grim. The narrative was unraveling in real time. And then he appeared. Malcolm Ellis stepped through the automatic glass doors like a storm held in human form. Suit unwrinkled, eyes unreadable, voice low and sharp. "Step away from my daughter." Cheryl's head snapped toward him. "Who are you?" "I'm the man who's going to make sure you never treat another passenger like that again." One of the officers stepped forward. "Sir, please identify yourself." Malcolm reached for his wallet slowly, deliberately. "Malcolm Ellis, father, legal guardian, emergency contact. I suggest you let me through unless you want to add wrongful detainment to your growing list of failures today." A hush fell. The officer stepped aside. Malcolm knelt beside Zuri, brushing the hair from her damp forehead. "Sweetheart." Zuri opened her eyes just enough. I saw enough. The rest, I'll own before the day is over." Paramedics arrived. Dr. Patel updated them quickly. "She has asthma. She requested water for over 40 minutes. No one listened. Malcolm stood and turned to Cheryl, who had begun inching away, hoping the crowd would forget her. They didn't. He spoke just loud enough for the crowd and the cameras to hear. "She begged for water. You ignored her. You mocked her. And then you said," he pulled out his phone, hit play, "your kind needs to learn patience." The recording echoed over the terminal speakers as other phones picked it up. The crowd stiffened. Cheryl's eyes went wide. "You can't. That's edited. That's illegal." "It's public evidence now," Malcolm said. "And so is every second of how you treated her." Security began to guide Cheryl away. She resisted at first, then stopped. She knew this wasn't going to get buried. As the paramedics lifted Zuri onto the stretcher, she looked to her father, her lips cracked, voice barely there. "Did you get it all?" Malcolm nodded. The whole world did. An hour later at Jefferson Medical Center, Zuri lay stabilized in a quiet hospital room. Monitors beeped gently. IV fluid dripped slowly. Her breathing had evened out, but the fatigue was deep in her bones. Malcolm stood by the window phone, pressed to his ear. His voice was clipped, surgical. "Yes, I need a full record of Skylight Airlines employee complaints filed over the last 7 years. I don't care if they're sealed. Unseal them." He hung up and turned to Dr. Patel, who had just entered. "She'll be okay. She was lucky. No permanent damage, but another 10 minutes and she'd have been in critical respiratory arrest." Malcolm nodded once. "Thank you for stepping in." Dr. Patel folded her arms. "You know I've seen this before. Ignored symptoms, dismissed urgency, but this was different. It was systemic." Malcolm replied. "No," she said. "It was deliberate." Back at the airport, Cheryl Dawson sat in a conference room surrounded by Skylight attorneys. Her hands trembled as they slid a stack of papers in front of her. Termination notice, internal investigation, media lockdown instructions. "You told me to be strict," she whispered. "You trained me to watch out for problem passengers." The legal team said nothing, because they knew, and now that the footage was public, they were ready to throw her under the plane. That night, the clip of Zuri's removal went viral. Over 6 million views in 12 hours. The hashtags trended. Justice for Zuri. She just needed water. Skylight exposed. In his hotel suite, Malcolm watched the coverage with his legal team. "This is just beginning," he said. "Tomorrow they'll find out who they've really been fighting." He looked down at his phone, which now buzzed nonstop, and smiled for the first time that day. By morning, Skylight Airlines was on fire, figuratively. News anchors replayed the viral video on loop, Zuri Ellis gasping for air, surrounded by silent passengers, while flight attendant Cheryl Dawson barked about protocol. The now infamous line, "Your kind needs to learn patience," had become a national flashpoint. The public backlash was swift. Skylight's official X, formerly Twitter account, posted a vague, heavily lawyered statement. "We are aware of the incident involving Flight 627. Skylight Airlines is committed to providing a safe and inclusive environment for all passengers. An internal review is underway. The replies were brutal. Air justice. You didn't review her oxygen levels. Why would you review anything now? At Black Mom Flies. My daughter has asthma. This could have been her. Boycott Skylight. At Flight Attendant Truths. We've known about Cheryl for years. Management protected her. Inside Skylight's corporate offices located in a glass fortress in Lower Manhattan, the mood was chaos layered beneath denial. CEO Richard Blanchard paced the boardroom, barking orders at legal PR and operations teams. She wasn't removed for asthma, he growled. She was disruptive. But we can't prove that, one lawyer murmured. She was recording, another executive shouted. Isn't that a violation? No, said a younger compliance officer flatly. It's legal when related to safety concerns. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Then bury it. Bury the whole damn thing. Meanwhile, in a hotel suite across town, Malcolm Ellis sat surrounded by a war room of his own. Civil rights lawyers, digital analysts, and 2 former Skylight employees who had reached out overnight. One of them, a former HR coordinator, dropped a file on the table. Cheryl Dawson had 23 discrimination complaints over 12 years, she said. All filed by minority passengers. All dismissed as unsubstantiated. Malcolm scanned the report. Each entry had a similar pattern. Passenger was argumentative, did not follow crew instructions, raised voice, and in none of them was Cheryl ever disciplined. Find out who buried these, Malcolm said coldly, and get me the list of passengers, every one of them. At the hospital, Zuri lay awake, scrolling through her tablet. News headlines flooded every feed. Teen removed from plane for asking for water. Flight attendant suspended after asthma incident. Father of teen, they picked the wrong passenger. A knock came at her door. A woman in a gray blazer stepped inside, flanked by a man in a Skylight Airlines pin. Ms. Ellis, I'm with Skylight's corporate relations team, the woman said, smiling too brightly. We want to express our deep regret for the misunderstanding. We'd like to cover your medical expenses in full. We also have a standard non-disclosure agreement, the man added. Just a formality. Zuri didn't say a word. She picked up her phone, typed a short text. They're here, NDA in hand. Seconds later, the room's other door opened. Malcolm entered like a slow-moving avalanche. Leave. The woman blinked. I'm sorry, I said leave. This is over. You've already lost. The man stammered. We were told you might be open to settlement. Not before discovery. Not before depositions. Not before every journalist in the country gets a full copy of the security footage. He walked over, gently adjusted Zuri's blanket, then turned back to them. I own 63% of your airline. Cheryl wasn't the problem. She's the symptom. The disease is how you trained her. The reps didn't respond. They couldn't. They just left fast. Hours later, Skylight's board held an emergency session. The CFO announced a 12% drop in stock value. Half the top hashtags in the U.S. were about them. Richard Blanchard called for calm. We release a new statement, suspend Cheryl, officially announce an investigation, and request Zuri's family take down the video. The room went silent. Greg Stanton, the COO in waiting, and Malcolm's longtime contact inside the company leaned forward. You still don't get it, do you? What Zuri's father is Malcolm Ellis. Blanchard frowned. The tech guy, the billionaire, the man who owns the building we're sitting in. For the first time that day, Richard Blanchard went quiet. Meanwhile, David Monroe, the businessman from seat 17A, posted the full 12-minute video from his phone. It included Cheryl's dismissal, Zuri's repeated requests, and the asthma attack that followed. Within minutes, Skylight's legal team contacted him, demanding the video be removed or they'd sue for defamation and unauthorized recording. David replied with a screenshot, Skylight's own terms of service allowing passenger recording. The internet exploded. Zuri's story wasn't just a trend. It had become a reckoning. For passengers, for black girls, for anyone who's ever been told to wait your turn while others were served first. At 11:52 p.m., Skylight issued a second statement. Effective immediately, flight attendant Cheryl Dawson has been placed on unpaid suspension pending investigation. We remain committed to equity and inclusion. But it was too late, because Malcolm Ellis wasn't looking for an apology. He was preparing a reckoning of his own. The boardroom at Skylight Airlines headquarters had never been this quiet. 10 executives sat at the polished walnut table, each one glancing nervously toward the man who had just walked in. Malcolm Ellis, dressed in tailored charcoal gray eyes, unreadable, a single leather folder in his hand. Beside him stood Sandra Wu, his lead counsel, and Dr. Rashid, a civil rights compliance expert whose presence alone sent signals. This wasn't a discussion. It was a declaration. At the head of the table, CEO Richard Blanchard forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Ellis, I'm sure we can resolve this. You've already had your chance," Malcolm said, his voice quiet, measured but carrying the weight of an empire. He opened the folder. Inside were documents stamped with ownership seals, SEC filings, and internal communications. "I've kept quiet for 5 years, observed your leadership, analyzed your complaint process, watched how you handled passengers who looked like me and my daughter." He paused, letting the weight of that word, daughter, settle over the room. Richard's face paled. "Zuri, is your—" "Yes," gasps. One board member dropped his pen. Another pulled out his phone and began scrolling furiously. Sandra laid a copy of the documents in front of each executive. "As of this morning," she said, "Mr. Ellis publicly confirms his ownership of 63% of Skylight Airlines. All verified shares, all legally acquired. Until now, he chose to remain anonymous." Dr. Rashid added, "That ends today." Malcolm walked slowly to the end of the room, pressed a button on the wall. A projector screen lowered. Slide 1. Discrimination complaints by race, Skylight. Airline's 5-year summary. 274 documented cases. 0 terminations. 0 formal disciplinary actions. Slide 2. Cheryl Dawson, complaint history confidential. 23 complaints. All dismissed. All filed by passengers of color. Slide 3. Internal email flag frequent flyers who file complaints. Monitor discreetly. The room was ice. "This is not about Cheryl," Malcolm said. "She's just the final straw. What I've found is a system designed to silence, to deny, and to protect those who harm your customers." One executive cleared his throat. "We can form a committee to—" "No." Malcolm's voice cut through like glass. "You've had years. I've got videos. I've got testimony. I've got a daughter who nearly died because of your culture." He paused. "And now I've got control." He turned back to this table, laying down the law. Effective immediately, Cheryl Dawson is terminated. CEO Richard Blanchard is suspended pending formal investigation. Skylight will launch an independent audit of every discrimination complaint since 2015. All executive bonuses are frozen until further notice. Skylight will fund a $50 million transportation equity initiative to study, report, and reform racial bias in air travel. Silence. Then someone whispered, "You'll destroy the company." Malcolm looked at them stone-faced. "No, you already started that. I'm here to fix it." Outside media trucks had already gathered. Rumors had leaked. The internet buzzed with headlines. Skylight Airlines owner steps forward, and it's Zuri's father. Systemic racism met its match in one boardroom showdown. Inside, Richard stood slowly. "You're making this personal." "It is personal," Malcolm said, "because discrimination always is." Then he leaned forward, voice low. "But this isn't revenge. It's reform. You built a system where people like Cheryl thrived. I'm building one where people like Zuri survive." As Malcolm walked out of the boardroom, press waiting outside, he turned to Sandra and said calmly, "Now, let's go rewrite the rules." 6 months later, Zuri Ellis stood at gate B-23 at O'Hare International, her boarding pass in hand. She wore no special outfit, no press waited, no camera crews. Just a 17-year-old black girl in a hoodie and jeans headed to Washington, D.C. for the National Youth Leadership Conference, where she would give the opening keynote on dignity, accountability, and change. She was flying economy class by choice, because change didn't matter if it only reached the first few rows. The gate agent scanned her ticket, nodded politely. "Have a great flight, Miss Ellis." Zuri offered a quiet smile. "You too." As she entered the plane and walked down the aisle, memories tugged at her. The last time she'd sat in 17B, her breath had thinned. Her rights had vanished and her life had been reduced to someone else's assumption. She found her seat. 17B again. This time the air felt different. She stowed her bag and sat quietly. Then she looked up. The flight attendant assigned to her section, Cheryl Dawson. Zuri's breath caught, but only for a second. Cheryl approached slowly. Her posture wasn't stiff. Her eyes were tired but calm. She looked Zuri directly in the face. "Good afternoon," she said, voice steady. "Can I offer you a bottle of water before we begin?" "Boarding?" Zuri met her eyes. "Yes. Thank you." Cheryl handed her the bottle, then turned to the man in the aisle seat and the woman at the window, offering them the same tone, the same service. No glances, no skipped rows, no judgment, just service. Equal, professional, human. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Cheryl returned for beverage service. She paused by row 17, leaned slightly toward Zuri, her voice quiet. "I think about what happened every day," she said. "Not to defend it, just to learn from it." Zuri listened. "I didn't see you as a person that day," Cheryl continued. "I saw a version of something I thought I understood. I didn't. I'm sorry." Zuri let the silence sit, then nodded. "Growth usually starts with discomfort," she said. "And what matters isn't who we were. It's what we do next." Cheryl blinked, then nodded back and moved on. That was it. No applause, no headlines, no dramatic resolution, just two people, acknowledging something that used to be broken. Later, as Zuri gazed out the window, she typed a short text to her dad. Same seat, same flight, same airline. But this time, dignity. He replied a minute later, "That's all we ever wanted." When the plane landed, no one rushed to record. No one watched Zuri for the wrong reasons. No one withheld her water, and no one told her to be patient. She walked off the plane with her head high and her presence quiet. She didn't need volume. Her existence was the statement, and this time the system heard it. She didn't yell, she didn't fight, she simply asked for dignity, and the world listened. Zuri's story reminds us that change doesn't always start with power. Sometimes it starts with patience, and the courage to say, "This isn't right." If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes quiet voices can shake broken systems. And if you believe every passenger deserves respect, regardless of race or seat number, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories that expose injustice and inspire change. We'll see you in the next one.